above Lincoln Financial Field. The Eagles and the Dolphins are getting ready for the third preseason game. John, this will be really the last chance we get to see some of the starters. And how much do we anticipate some of these guys playing tonight? It sounds like a little bit less than a normal third preseason game.
Yeah, I think the dual practices with the Dolphins kind of skewed Doug's thinking as far as the traditional environment of the so-called dress rehearsal game, where you generally like to get the starters into the third quarter to get the feel of sort of leaving the locker room in a regular season game. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. It might for some guys, but it's pretty clear Doug wants to put the really, really important players in bubble wrap, and that's why guys like Brandon Graham, Jordan Hicks, he's not even going to consider obviously playing them. And if anybody has any issues whatsoever, you can bet they're going to be pulled out as quickly as possible.
Some of the guys that I said that I'm looking forward to tonight, I guess it's that wide receiver spot. Aguilar, Hollins, Marcus Johnson, Shelton Gibson, Bryce Treggs. Any of those guys tonight need a big night?
I think they all do, because I think they are all fighting for a job at this stage. And if you look at Bryce Treggs specifically, I was watching him. He was out there running routes because he's been out of practice with the leg soreness. So it looks like he's going to try to go, and that kind of tells you this is important for guys like that. And Bryce was really effective against Green Bay before injuring himself, but he kind of knows he's got to be on the field to punctuate this and try to win a roster spot.
John McMullen is at Lincoln Financial Field. Also the running back spot. We talked earlier about Sproles not needing to see him at all, but do you want to see LeGarrette Blount at all tonight, or do you anticipate a very limited amount of action out of him too?
Well, they'd like to get LeGarrette going a little bit, just because there's been so much talk about how this team has been unable to run the ball in the first two preseason games. So he carried it 9 times in the first two preseason games. I think they would like to have the same type of 4 or 5 carries, but you'd like to see some effectiveness and maybe 25 or 30 yards. I think that's the bigger issue with the running game. As far as the running backs who need to produce, I think Wendell Smallwood, because he's been injured, has been unable to get on the field the first 2 games. I think it's key for him, and obviously Corey Clement needs to continue to play well if he wants to push for a roster spot. And then there's Donnell Pumphrey. Everyone kind of just checks off Donnell Pumphrey as being on this team because of his status as a 4th-round pick, but he has not been effective at all. So you'd like to get him in space and sort of show what he can do, because he's a space player, and he hasn't had a lot of space to work with.
Hey, John, I said earlier I wouldn't mind seeing Smallwood, maybe get a quarter, just give him the ball, see if he can be a guy. I mean, can he be the lead guy? Do you anticipate they have the same mindset that I do?
Yeah, they do. They expect the way this coaching staff talks about Wendell Smallwood, he's part of this team. So he's not fighting necessarily for a roster spot. But what they need to see out of him is the ability to stay on the field, as I mentioned, the ability to take the pounding and be okay and be able to go each and every week. So that kind of starts in the preseason. It is important for him to not only run the ball, run it well, but also get out of this game healthy and prove he can be somebody they can count on.
John, Derek Barnett, yesterday, Dave Weinberg was on with us from the press. He wrote an article about Derek Barnett, how he's been impressive, but he said he's done seeing him with the 3rd and the 2nd team guys. He wants to see reps against that 1st team. Do we think Derek Barnett will get that shot tonight?
I hope so. I asked Doug that after last week's game, because he has proven everything he can prove against the backup. He's had 3 sacks in 2 games. He almost had a 4th. He's been really, really consistent. And now you want to see him take that step up in competition against the first-team offensive line and see if he has that same kind of success. If that starts, you could see Derek Barnett quickly surpassing Vinny Curry as the starter at right end. Obviously, he's the 14th overall pick in the draft, so you hope he's on the field a lot. And if he's the starter, obviously that's going to be the case. But we need to see it against the first tier of competition.
Another guy that I'm intrigued by tonight would be Darby, obviously. We've talked a lot about him leading into this game, but I'm interested to see if the Eagles give him a little bit longer of a run to get him more comfortable. Do you think that's in their plans?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the starters will certainly play at the least deep into the second quarter, and he's part of that. And I think people want to see what he can do against a team he's not familiar with. I think if you think about the sort of weird way that trade went down and the fact that it was made the same week those two teams, Buffalo and Philadelphia, were playing in the preseason. Well, obviously Ronald Darby knew the Buffalo Bills very well and what they like to do from practices. So I think people want to see him do it against a Miami Dolphin team. And if he has a similar type of success, all of a sudden you start to say, maybe the Eagles really do have something. Personally, like I said earlier in the week on the show, I don't want to spin him as Deion Sanders, but he's a heck of a lot better than anybody the Eagles had at the cornerback position.
Talking with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. He is in Philly for the game tonight. One guy that we haven't heard a whole heck of a lot about is Chris Long. Is his role going to be defined, or is it diminishing? What do you see from Long?
No, I mean, Chris is really, really solid, not only on the field, in the locker room. He's already a leader. I mean, he's just a class guy. He's going to be a significant part of Jim Schwartz's rotation. He spent most of the training camp as second-team left end behind Brandon Graham. He'll start tonight at that position because Brandon is obviously out. So you'll get to see a lot of Chris Long, but yeah, he's part of that rotation. And the Eagles are very, very secure in the knowledge that he's going to be a top backup player and a guy you can count on for 25 or 30 snaps a game.
A couple other interesting players tonight. Russel Douglas, whose kind of role is kind of not defined right now, right? I mean, you've got Mills, Darby. Do you think Patrick Robinson is he a definite?
No, I don't think he's a definite. I think that's one of the most interesting battles. He's kind of taken over the first-team slot position while Ron Brooks was injured. So I think he'll be the first guy out there in the nickel at the slot position. But I think it's going to be interesting between those two guys because him and Ron Brooks, I don't know if you can keep them both. So these final 2 weeks, I think ultimately whoever Jim Schwartz thinks is better suited to play inside, I think he's going to make the roster. I think the other guy's going to be in one of the odd men out.
Hey, Cory Graham, he was a guy that kind of brought in just because they were so limited there. Is he a guy to keep an eye on tonight in terms of is he battling with Jalen Watkins, or can both those guys make it Terrence Brooks the safety spot, the backup safety spot?
Now, I'll tell you, very, very quickly, Cory Graham has seized the third safety position on this team. He's going to make this football team, the Eagles, like him a lot. They're very comfortable with him. And he started to take reps again at the cornerback position, sort of in a last-ditch effort to make this team, to show the versatility. Maybe he can play both positions, but when the Eagles put Malcolm Jenkins in the slot, when they have a play against big receivers, they're going to rotate Cory Graham in at safety, and they think that's going to be a big upgrade from what they had to do last year when they had to bring in Jalen Watkins. So Cory Graham has quickly asserted himself and is going to be a part of this defense.
So I guess when you have that kind of mindset, you're more or less going for broke. I mean, if you're bringing the veteran guy in and kind of superseding a younger player, it means you're hopeful this year that the veteran helps you win football games, right? I mean, I know that sounds simple, but a lot of teams have different expectations and will keep the younger guy because they want to develop a player, whereas it looks like with this type of decision, the Eagles are saying, we need the veteran here because we want to win.
Well, I think it's sort of half and half. I do think they want to win. I do think they believe they have a chance to push for a playoff spot. But, you know, it's also at a position where I don't think they were very high on Jalen Watkins. I don't think they believe that he was going to develop and be like a key young piece. Whereas you look at the guys like Russel Douglas, you mentioned, Russel's probably not ready to play right now, but the Eagles think he has a very high ceiling, so he's in no danger of losing his roster spot. So I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. And if there was a better prospect at safety, it might be a different conclusion. But I just think the Eagles didn't believe they had enough behind Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod.
You wrote about it today. They do believe they had enough behind the offensive line. I mean, they decided to go with the younger guys rather than some older swing guy veterans like Alan Barber, Matt Tobin, those guys out. They're trusting some of the younger players on the offensive line.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of what I was just saying, because they think those two particular players, Big V, Vaitai, and Dylan Gordon, both have bright futures in this league. And that's an example where there's no doubt Alan Barber would be better right now today if they could have convinced him to stay. But he believes he's a starter. He's probably going to be a starter. Even Matt Tobin would probably be a little bit better today than, say, Dylan Gordon. But Gordon has such a high ceiling. He's so athletic. He's so versatile. He can play tackle. He can be an extra tight end. He can play fullback. That's an example of where you keep a younger player because he's got a chance to be much better down the road.
All right, John is in Philly for tonight's preseason game between the Eagles and the Dolphins. For a reaction after the game, go to 973ESPN.com. Follow John on Twitter at JF McMullen for tonight's Eagles-Dolphins preseason game, which is coming up in about 15 minutes here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, John.
Hey, thanks, guys. Give my best to the Sixers.